Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, ballots are counted in Ethiopia after landmark elections as President Abiy Ahmed tries to focus on a message of unity from Monday's exercise. There are new reports of fighting flaring in the northern region of Tigray. Also, Burkina Faso's hit with another suspected extremist attack. 11 police officers killed in an ambush. In a push for peace, the country's recently shifted tack on its previous refusal to talk to terrorists and has been cautiously engaging in limited dialogue. And South Africa will host the continent's first COVID-19 vaccine production facility. It's a huge boost for Africa's battle to manufacture more jabs for its own use within the region. But first, vote counting continues in Ethiopia after Monday's key elections. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed declared the exercise an historic one. Polls were mostly peaceful, but there were reports of intimidation of opposition party members in some regions. There were also reports from the Oromia region of 3 officials having been killed in an attack by an armed group. Maria Gerth-Nicolescu tells us more.
Polls closed late in the evening on Monday in Ethiopia after delays in delivering ballot papers. Some local observers also said they were lacking electoral agents, which explained the long waiting lines in front of polling stations. In some areas of the southern Sidama region, voting even continued on Tuesday. In total, 38 million Ethiopians were registered to vote, but about 1/5 of constituencies did not participate in the election. At least 64 of them will have to wait until September. Some opposition parties lodged complaints about voting interference and intimidation of their local observers at polling stations, but the Prime Minister said that Ethiopians have voted peacefully in what he called the first free and fair election in Ethiopia. Final results are expected around the 1st of July for the places that were able to vote. In the entire Tigray region, however, voting did not take place and no date has been set for elections there. Fighting continues between the Ethiopian army, backed by Eritrean soldiers, and the TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front. A humanitarian crisis, including a possible famine, is affecting civilian populations there. On Monday, the UN's human rights chief, Michelle Bachelet, expressed her concerns over serious human rights violations in the Tigray region.
Now, 11 police officers have been killed in an ambush by suspected jihadists in Burkina Faso. Several others are reportedly missing. The attack happened near Basologu in the centre-north of the country. It's been facing an insurgency that's cost at least 1,400 lives and forced about 1 million people from their homes since 2015. Now, until recently, Burkina Faso had been adamant in its refusal to enter into any kind of dialogue with jihadists. But in a bid to foster peace and reconciliation through new means, that position is shifting.
These 2 men are the Emir and the deputy mayor of the town of Thiou in Burkina Faso. They show a video of a meeting between local authorities and jihadist groups. They have decided that the only way to stop the fighting is through dialogue.
The
Officially, Burkina Faso's government does not support talks with jihadists.
L'État ne nous a pas demandé de réconcilier, de parler aux gens. Mais l'État n'est pas contre parce qu'ils ne nous ont pas empêché de faire le travail. Et eux, ils vont dire qu'ils sont contre, on va arrêter de le faire. Mais ce qu'on veut, si l'État peut accompagner les gens, parce que de temps en temps, c'est les maires qui nous aident avec l'essence, discrètement.
According to the NGO ACLED, which is specialized in armed conflicts, the number of victims has gone down in areas of Burkina Faso where talks were organized with jihadists. During negotiations, jihadists generally promised to end their attacks if local self-defense groups stop their patrols and if they can trade at the market. In neighboring Mali, the government said it was ready to hold talks with jihadists. But France is strongly opposed to such a move, and that's one reason why Emmanuel Macron has announced he wants to reduce French military operations in the Sahel region.
The court of the West African regional group ECOWAS has said that Nigeria cannot prosecute people for using Twitter. The government suspended the microblogging platform in early June after it removed a post from President Muhammadu Buhari in which he threatened to punish secessionists. Several NGOs and rights groups turned to the courts, arguing that the ban was a violation of human rights. Now, they are still waiting on a judgment on a bid to strike down the move. 15 hostages have escaped their kidnappers in Nigeria. The group of 9 boys and 6 girls were amongst 136 pupils and some teachers taken from an Islamic school in Tegina town in Niger State in May. The escapees reportedly managed to slip past sleeping guards in Zamfara State before trekking through the night into Kaduna State. Criminal gangs have recently ramped up kidnappings for ransom in the northwest and centre of the country. Well, the US's largest military exercise in Africa took place in Morocco this month. The 17th edition of the cooperation saw US and Moroccan armed forces coordinate more than 7,000 military personnel from 10 countries in practicing joint tactics and maneuvers. Our reporters were there. Take a look.
As France announced the end of its counter-terror Operation Barkhane in the Sahel, thousands of American soldiers were deployed to Morocco as part of the African Lion military exercise with local forces. The event aims to foster cooperation in response to the risks of international conflicts, despite a context degraded by the pandemic. The High Command of the 17th edition flies to the military base of Gria-le-Bouhi for the demonstration. Around 100 American soldiers have joined Moroccan armed forces in the desert.
It's a great exercise, great facilities, great partners, and it really builds U.S. readiness and Moroccan readiness along with interoperability. We all share same values, we love stability, and it works on really interoperability and us being able to work together when to solve problems.
The landscape which borders the Sahara is similar to that of the neighboring Sahel, which has become an epicenter of terrorist activity. There is a threat hanging over the world. So if we don't have this cooperation, if we don't have this, then we can't meet all together, hand in hand, our objectives to fight against this threat. Anti-aircraft guns with a range of 35 kilometers were brought in from Germany from the headquarters of the Africa Southern Europe Task Force. Colonel Ryan Dillon watches an artillery strike. It is the first time US cannons have been fired on the edge of the Sahara.
So the HIMARS is a high mobility artillery rocket system that shoots long-range precision fires to suppress enemy at locations at a great distance.
Gria-le-Bouhi's military base in the south of Morocco, close to the sandwall built by Morocco, was initially chosen for the African Lion scenario due in the summer of 2020. That was postponed because of the pandemic, a choice made prior to the Trump administration's controversial recognition of Morocco's sovereignty over Sahara in late 2020.
Now, South Africa will host the first ever technological transfer hub for coronavirus vaccines after talks with the World Health Organization. It will make vaccines and train other manufacturers to make the shots. It is a huge step for the continent as it struggles to source enough jabs to immunize its population against COVID-19. Jean-Emile Jamin has more.
An historic step, spreading life-saving technology. On Monday, the World Health Organization announced that it was setting up a hub in South Africa, aiming to give companies from the African continent the training and know-how to license and produce their own vaccines.
The consortium involves a company called African Biologics and Vaccines, which will act as the hub both by manufacturing mRNA vaccines itself and by providing training to a second manufacturer called BioVac. In time, Afrigen could provide training to other manufacturers in Africa.
The news will be welcomed, particularly in South Africa, where delayed deliveries have contributed to a notably slow vaccine rollout. Currently, the country accounts for nearly 40% of all cases in Africa, but until now, it hasn't been able to produce vaccines from scratch. The new hub would now make it possible to locally manufacture mRNA vaccines, as used in Pfizer, BioNTech and Moderna jabs, in as little as 9 to 12 months. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa welcomed the new initiative, saying it could help change the narrative for Africa. But he warned many challenges still lay ahead, most notably that of unequal vaccine distribution.
It is just not equitable and not fair that some people in certain countries, and because they come from rich countries, their lives are worth much more than the lives of those in poorer countries.
The sentiment was also shared by French President Emmanuel Macron, a long-time advocate for faster technological transfer.
Aujourd'hui est un grand jour pour l'Afrique. Chaque continent doit être en capacité de développer et de produire ses propres vaccins, ses propres médicaments.
But still, the continent faces an uphill battle in its race to vaccinate. While some of the world's highest income countries have injected nearly 3/4 of their population, that figure stands at just 3 doses per 100 people in Africa.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Do so again if you can. Take care.
Regain, a town in the Algerian Sahara, whose name will forever be associated with French nuclear testing. For almost a decade, France used it as an open-air laboratory, exposing Algerian civilians and French soldiers to radiation.
On est des cobayes du nucléaire.
60 years later, French victims are starting to receive compensation, while Algerian victims are still waiting. Revisited returns to the ruins of Regain. Watch it on France 24 and France24.com.
La Médina de Tripoli veut dire beaucoup pour les habitants.
Bienvenidos a las noticias de France 24.
Thanks very much for joining us. أهلا بكم في ثقافة في عدد اليوم. Ravi de vous retrouver pour Afrique Hebdo. Au programme cette semaine.
نسمع بين فينا ولا آخر.
This storm has hit New York City a lot.
To be a president. 3, 2, 1.
Madagascar fait face à une seconde vague meurtrière.
Almost 99 million of you watch us every week. So thank you.
شكرا.
Gracias. Your confidence means a lot to us.
Muchas gracias.
شكرا على هذه الثقة.
Thank you.
Merci du fond de mon cœur.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.